Alrighty, all you Circle of Oberos players, you deviants. We're starting out with Nuala today. So we're going to start with the skin tone, just to identify which areas are skin, because she's got a lot going on. And for that, we're going to start with Hammered Copper out of the Reaper line. Just a simple base coat to mark where things are. I've already added it to my palette down here. It's kind of a ruddy orangish tone. And it coats terribly, but it's the right color that we're looking for. Don't force it to cover, as always. You want to make sure that you get a few thin coats. And then we have skin. I'm gonna go ahead and have it poking through these wraps, kind of like her original model. I think this one's, you can see face, even though the face is behind bare teeth, which is going to make it fun to paint those eyes. But just probably 3 coats of this color for a base coat, and then I'll come in and show you where all the hidden areas of skin are. She's even got some like up here, but no chests. Well, I say that, and then I see right here, in between, right there. So that's going to be fun. Alright, once you get your base coat in, it's time to start working in those highlights. So for that, our first color is brown sand. So we're keeping in that tanner flesh, and then light flesh for spot highlights, points of interest. Up here on top of the hip, you can see I've already started on the leg here. The leg only goes to a mixture of brown sand and pale flesh. Just making sure you can see that on my screen here. Base coat and a mixture of the brown sand for first layer highlights. So I have a nice little easy spot to get here on the arm. So just kind of sketch in where you want your highlights to be, and then worry about blending later. Go over the bicep here a little bit, and then we need to accentuate this kind of armpit shape here, where the arm ties into the body. Go ahead and connect it right there. Pull it in. And then making sure we get that spot in there. And again, we'll blend later, and keep in mind there are overages on straps and things that you're not going to see because we're going to clean up later. Looking at all the places that there are skin, I found a few extra ones. Her fingers are on the back side of this claw glove here. She's got a lot of flesh peeking through her straps. Her belly is showing. You have the little window to the sole there. Face, top of the arm through here. There's a little place here that I just started adding flesh. Armpit. You got the hip on the other side. You got flesh peeking through the straps all over the place. Hope you guys like painting skin. Alright, so now that that's dry, we'll go in and adjust light again. And this is a pretty bright highlight, so be very sparing with your bright skin highlights for her. Can't really pull toward the highlight with where this spear is, so having to cheat a little bit. Go against the rules. Again, accentuating that shape. Getting down in there. And I wouldn't go, so here I have a mixture right in this tiny little hip joint. I have a mixture of my pale flesh and my sand brown. The pale flesh is super, super bright. Probably only use that for a few accents on the face and on the cheek, but also deciding whether or not we want to give her some nice war paint across her face here. The front of the knee, you can see I got a little bit brighter, so pulling my highlight from the shadow toward the center section of the leg, so that did go up to the mix of pale flesh on these two areas. You can kind of see if I touch it in there, it doesn't really change much because that knee is like out forward, catching a lot of light, so we want to brighten that up. I'm going to continue to work on the flesh and then give you more insight on that once I'm finished up. Alright, we got the skin in and developed. You can see we went back and blended a little bit. A lot of these brush strokes in the open area are just a kind of a stippling motion with a dot, 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 dot. Face is fairly easy to get to over here on this side. On the reverse side, it is kind of a nightmare. Used, I think, this little piece of fur that's sticking up where you can see some of the skin tone on, and kind of used it to push the brush tip, so the brush tip was bending into place. I wasn't going to try to paint these eyes on camera because there's already enough going on with trying to get in there and avoid teeth and stuff, which you see I didn't do. Again, it was painting past the teeth. I went in and cleaned up some areas with black just for sanity's sake to make sure that my light and shadows were working well on the face. And we might put some more paint on her. I've asked that question, so we might go back and do that. Now we're going to get started on the straps. So I want to have kind of a deep purple in the shadows to accent the oranges that we're going to have for kind of this fall autumn scheme that we're doing. So I'm going to start with a tan that has an orange base in it. So for that, the Vallejo khaki here, and then I don't want to use like a super strong purple, but one that's got kind of a blue tint to it. So I might find another bottle of this royal purple. This one's out, so I'm going to go grab one of those. Well, alright, in the middle of filming last week, my fiance got the call that she had COVID, so I have not been working for a week. That's been fun. Didn't want to get everybody sick in my studio. So where we left off was painting in the base colors for the straps here, which was a combination of the royal purple and khaki. I'm going to go ahead and base coat everything. And then walk you through the process of highlighting along the leg. But I've done a sample here just to get back into the swing of things. This is from the purple base all the way up to a pure khaki. Plans are to add a little bit of white to the khaki for primary highlights along the leg, just to deepen the value of the shadow, because the shadow is pretty light. But it's meant to be because the straps are meant to look brighter on the skin and overall. So I'm going to go through and do that just so you can see which areas I'm base coating in that color. Yeah, pretty decent base coat on all the little wrappings that are around on the model. So there's like a little one up here by the head of the spear, up at the top of the fur on both sides of the hand. I just coated the whole thing. There's pieces of staff that are showing through on there, but I'm not quite worried about that yet. So I was showing you, see, here's the problem with mixing colors too close together. One color is just going to push its way all the way through my color, so I have to remix. I get a little bit brighter here. And this might be right at where I was for this first layer. Yeah, so we're going to go brighter. I had the intuition, I just didn't trust it. Like, that looks too dark. Alright. Gonna start highlighting up, and again, just volumetric highlights, really. I'm not worried about the edges anymore. Next to the skin. but if you guys are, I think it gives it like a little bit better of a separation to have the skin denoted. And I kind of follow the edges of the wrap, because the wrap in kind of that style where it dips in the middle. And then once I've kind of figured out where that stopping line is for the highlight, I just fill it in. Paint over all that previous hard work of base coating. And just continually mixing up until I get to this kind of pure khaki. This isn't pure khaki, it still has some purple in it. And I might smooth out a little bit of this off camera with some blends. It'd just be different mixes of the khaki with the purple. More increments. Kind of roughing them in here right now. They're seeing it shifting more to a natural look. I'm going to take this off-white, add a little bit of this, bring my khaki up. I noticed that my camera like picks up on me swallowing. I feel like I swallow loud now. It's a self-conscious aspect of filming yourself painting models and having to go back and make sure I didn't put any of the portions that my son, taping himself playing with Legos or something. Because, Daddy, let me borrow your phone. You see we're going up brighter on that crest of the thigh there. Let my brush get hung up real quick. Gotta be careful with this model. It is 3D printed, and this little foot is the only connection point. I think I skipped the pure khaki here, so I'll use a little bit of that to blend, thinned it down. That's kind of what we're going for. Again, I'm gonna blend it just a little bit and probably weather it up a little bit. Not sure quite yet though. I'll get back here when we finished highlighting up the straps and kind of walk you through the process one more time. Alright, we've got our straps in. I'm taking it all the way up to maybe like a 75% mix of our off-white for our highlights, so trying to keep it brighter in the areas that are exposed to light. Keeping in mind that some of these areas that have like strong purple in them, we're going to go back with our browns. Speaking of our browns, we're mixing up a base coat for all of our leather areas. So the leather components will be a mixture of Chimera orange added into a blackened brown. So the orange to really give it that kind of rich, warm tone, and then a dab of black just to peel back the value a good bit for our base coat. And that's going to be all the leather areas. We'll go back and work on the stitching, so don't worry about hitting those now. We'll pick a nice complementary and value change to make those kind of pop out and be interesting. But for now, leathers, I think previously, I missed some areas when we're talking about stuff. I didn't get these straps on the previous step, and I went back and noticed that I hadn't gotten those. We are going to do the buckles in a non-metallic, but the leather areas will include the belts, not the wrappings. There's a belt here that runs along her waistline. And then anything kind of tying together. We'll get this little strap that's holding on her claw. And then all of these, the corset and everything. Don't worry about hitting the fur. We're going to go back and go through some steps on that. It's kind of a toss-up on which one to do first, the fur or the leathers. I decided to go ahead and knock out these leathers while I'm thinking about it. Also looking at the back, she's got like an Oberoth symbol here. And we're going to address that. We're going to treat these as belts on her quiver. You can always highlight up, like move it up in a different color just to differentiate an object. If we want to make the straps look just a little bit different, maybe instead of going a single color like a tan to blend up, we add some stronger reds or kind of split off once we get to the mid-tones. For now, base coats. Alright, we got our base coats in, and now I'm adding pure orange to that mixture that we had. Just to keep the saturation pretty high on our orange here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and do every layer as one step on each piece that's going to be leather or that we've base coated, just to keep the mixtures consistent, because it is kind of a mix up first and then add orange, 3 different colors. I'm trying to keep it consistent throughout. There's not too bad of a transition as far as smoothness on these colors, but I'd probably go back and glaze as a post after we get everything on there. I want to see what it looks like first before we do a glaze. A glaze or a wash. Like, wash it back down. Leathers are typically a little bit easier to pull off a wash with. So again, just doing volumetric highlights for the moment. Then we'll switch over to more light directed. I mean, I'm keeping light in mind while I'm doing this, but at the same time, maybe a little less. Definitely trying to keep shadows intact where I want them. I'll go through and then we'll join you on the next step. Next mixture, already applied one coat here so you can see sort of the transfer happening. So orange, black and brown, and a little bit of our khaki added in. Bump down the desaturation, but or bump up the desaturation, and also keep the value increasing, because I want orange, right? But I don't want like super orange. I want like those weird, the old-timey version of Santa Claus red, you know what I'm talking about, where it's like that desaturated darker red. I want that color but in orange, if that makes any sense. I'm not really doing controlled highlights yet. So, but keeping our shadows as a whole overall. I'm trying to keep things interesting at the same time. You can see the color down here. Slow down and do a little close-up work. And I'm just hitting everything all at the same time. Everything that needs to be hit. I went ahead and worked up the leather on a few objects just to solidify where I wanted my mixtures to be. Stepping up the colors with the orange and the brown mixture and khaki mixed in. You can see the progression here, and after 2 steps of khaki, starting to add in some of the pure off-white here, and then adding more texture to the objects as I paint them. So I'll illustrate here on the back edge of the cloak. Let's see, we can build up our value. And see, as it dries, it will calm down a little bit. But then, as we're building, I start mapping out a little bit of texture on the cloak. Just some areas where scratches and stuff have happened as she's running along. So volumetric and at the same time texture. So these are scratches that can kind of dictate the flow of where these sort of scratches happen as the value increases in our model. So still doing kind of the overall lighting, not just scratches. And I did lighten up this shadow in here just a little bit. Kind of want it to transition a little bit more softly. Probably going to add a lot of scratches down at the bottom as we get brighter. So this is our next color, so we kind of go in a little bit slower. Reinforce a few of those marks that we put in. Make them make a little bit more sense. And we can come in along this line too. It looks pretty bright on camera. In between these little sewn in marks. Leather gets pretty textured. Just trying to represent that. With those colors. So working up, and we get pretty bright. So the last color is down in here, and this is mostly edges, and then small little accent areas on the main cloak. They're building up our leather in that way. Now that we have the leather set in place as far as tone value, we're going to take the tone and shift it a little bit more toward that orange using a little bit of our Magmadroth, did I say that? Magmadroth Flame and the Reichland Flesh Shade. So kind of a reddish orange, and then the thinning it down. Contrasts are pretty heavy. The washes are a little bit lighter. And then using a red tone. We're not applying this like a wash, we're applying it like a glaze. So we're going real quick and real light. We do not want it to pool, and we do not want it to dry before we get it applied. So like pick a section with like a stop and start. So the seam here, this hard edge, paint it. Don't start trying to do the whole thing and then let a section dry. You'll get overlaps. You won't like them, I promise, because they'll create hard lines. And at this step, you don't want to create hard lines. You want to blend the hard lines away. Again, working quick, eye on the model, making sure, getting that rich tone in there, like oil in a piece of leather. And you can see here it's deepening that color a good bit. And here I've added a little bit of a yellow glaze to the straps that go around the I guess it's a quiver, so that they'll just differentiate themselves a little bit. But go ahead and hit this whole section. I can do this on camera as well. You see what I'm doing? I'm loading the brush with wash and then taking it off, because it's going to have plenty of pigment for a glaze-like application. Don't want to get orange there. That's what I get for talking and painting. But again, you can use washes as glazes. You just can't treat them like a wash when you glaze with them. You have to treat them like a glaze, which means you load your brush and then you unload your brush. Just like dry brushing, when you load your brush and unload your brush, you have to get used to how much paint should be in your brush when you're doing these steps, because it really does help just knowing the brush load. It makes application simple. You see how fast I'm able to apply the paint once I have kind of a mixture. I see how much paint's coming off my brush, and then I just go in here and I go, okay, cool, let's glaze this out with a contrast and a wash mixed on TurboDork's new palette, which I'm really liking the silicone palette. This is pretty much the only thing I can keep clean, because it's silicone. It doesn't like stain or hold paint. This will help us differentiate our flesh tone a little bit, because we're getting kind of close to our flesh tone with our colors. So I wanted to go in there and add like a punch of color to differentiate those sections a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and wash the rest of this, and then we'll move on to fur. Alright, fur time. I've gone ahead and done a base coat for our fur. It is a mixture of Prussian blue, blackened brown, and khaki. So about equal parts, these maybe tending to the blue side a little bit more, and then just a hair of khaki to bring up the tone. Gives us a pretty naturalistic gray to work up to a whiter fur. So I'm gonna add some white to my palette, giving you guys a chance to pause. before we get to the next step. I'm gonna mix up another kind of base of this color. I'm running out of palette space. I'm gonna have to change out my palette tomorrow. I got some space up here. And then khaki. So you can see it gives us kind of that natural blue gray. Right here you can see it like kind of on black. You can use a blue gray if you want. I'm gonna mix some white in here, and you see how that blue really livens up, kind of like a wolf fur. I said bear earlier. I think it's a wolf. It is circle, so it should be a wolf, right? And we're gonna start highlighting. Now, I wouldn't worry too much about filling in shadows on the top areas, just because you'll still get that volumetric highlight. Light will knock out highlights or shadows, and it will punch highlights into those areas. Even though the shape, it's like sometimes you get kind of, well, I know I sometimes get kind of focused on individual object shape instead of like whole object and whole piece, which is kind of a byproduct of being self-taught and being in that sort of Games Workshop mindset of painting, which has been a hard habit to break through the years. But I feel like I'm getting there. I feel like it. So just giving you examples of different areas that we're working up with the fur here. Just going a little bit brighter for now, and eventually all the way up to white. New day, new palette. Yay! Still continuing on the fur here. You can see I've been layering up all the way to white, trying to keep in mind where light placement should be for these different objects. I'm not sure if they're going to like the white or not. We'll see. I don't know if it fits in with the character. Anyway, it's okay because we have our values in, so we can always go in with a contrast, a glaze, or a wash, or all, and shift these colors, especially when you have a grayscale. Like it's developed, it's on there, it'll be easy to change up. So just for sanity's sake, again, we're going all the way up to white. It was about a 5 to 6 step mix to get there, depending on the area. And we're going to continue along and also finish out the highlighting stuff on the face. I think it'd be cool to have a white wolf in Oberos, and we're going to have that nice gold and green gauntlet with the teeth and stuff, and then the arrowheads are going to be kind of a ruddy bone with black at the tips, make them look a little bit dangerous. So going to continue on and get back with you when we're done with the fur. Details. Time for details. Got the fur done. I've blacked out some areas, just cleaned up some of the interactions. I didn't go in between the wraps yet. But next step after the fur is done, you can see here a lot of texture work, a lot of little kind of stippling motions. Put black in the eye, black for the nose. We're going to highlight that later. Just put a little pin highlight on it. I might as well do that now. So while you guys are watching. So take that same blue that we kind of highlighted the fur with. We're going to keep it majority black. This is just going to be a reflection. The eyes will just get a little white dot. Go along kind of the bridge of the nose here. You can see bridge of the nose and then down. And then we'll do a little spot reflection for shiny nose. There we go. So we got a little pupper nose. I guess he's a dead pupper, but anyway, took some nun oil Yep, none oil. This one's at the kind of the bottom of the barrel, so it got kind of thick, but we're just putting it right over each one of the stitches, not washing the whole area, just going, you know, brush strokes that are controlled. And now we need a color for the stitching, which I want to go with kind of a yellowy. So I got some of my Sulphurous brown here. They're going to make a darker yellowy brown. Sulphurous usually comes with a gray top, but one of the airbrush tops made it on there. And we'll lighten it up with some white, get that kind of rope color. And then we're going to base coat all the stitches with that. So this color will play nicely with the redness of our leather. Brain and mouth, hand and mouth won't work at the same time. So we're going to base coat all our stitches there, and you can kind of see the effect with the drop shadow now that the first color's on. And highlight them up just a two-step for these because they don't need like a lot of highlight. Might do it as a texture, as like a rope texture, so like a dot dot dot. But we'll go ahead and just hit this area here in between the legs, back, right there on the back, on the quiver, and then there's one other area, yeah, right back here I need to hit with the wash, and then in between on the chest, on the vest there. Right, so once those base coats are in, we're going to highlight. I'm taking, like I said, 3 dots, dot dot dot. Just added a little bit of white to that color that we mixed up, so we get kind of a twine-like effect on here, on the back here. Stutter stepping it. You know, if you can only fit 2 dots, only put 2 dots. Heck, if you can only highlight it and just put like a dot, do that. Illustrate on some inside ones too. Just to add that nice little rope-like effect for tying together a sheet of leather that's 6 inches thick. Wonder how much that weighs. Probably a good bit. Now we're base coating this symbol that she's got, the Obro symbol on the back here. Taking a little bit of our black and brown and some cinnamon red from Reaper. Is it cinnamon? Yeah, cinnamon. Alright. And then we're going to take some of our tan, or let's take some of the pale yellow. I want to keep the red from getting too pink, so I'm going to have some yellow in my highlight. Go more. There we go. You see how, I mean, it still got a little bit pink with that pale yellow, but kept it warm. And then we're just going to kind of highlight it up in the same method that we really did the leather, which is a little bit of a like volume, edge, and weathered at the same time. Just keeping all 3 things in mind. Concentrating on high points. Watching out for them clowns. They'll get you. Clowns are scary. Add a little bit more. Same thing. And then this has stitching around it as well, so we're going to use the same colors. I saw that while I was painting the other stitching. I was like, oh wait, they're stitching all the way around this thing too. So better get this done while that color is already mixed up. Take a little bit of your black wash. Go around the edge where the stitches are, just to drop a shadow, and then go through those same steps to get your your stitching on. But now that sticks out. It's, you know, it's not a sore thumb though. Oh, Spotify, I like to quit. Alright, time to do our little nod to Oberos. Got our Necrotite green, our highlight, and Sick green, our base color. We're just going to knock this down into the recesses of the armor here. It's okay if you get stuff up on the side. It's almost impossible to avoid doing that. And if you have trouble, you know, getting paint down in there, then just paint the whole thing, and then I'll show you what I do to clean it up. So we're going to do this on the arm and the little pendant that she's got. Try and wiggle the brush around in there until you knock it down. I got a little bitty drip here of the Necrotite. I'm just going to go for the top side here. Change my angle up just a little bit. So I got the implication of a highlight. And then we're going to go back with our black and just carefully ride it along the top edge. Barely touch. And that'll clean it up. And then for our gold, our brass, starting with the black, keeping it, treating it like kind of like a cylinder, so the curve, the top curve. We got that laid in, now we know where our highlight is. We'll take some more of our pale yellow, mix up another layer, and you kind of notice I'm using the side of my brush. I'm not pointing down. If I do that, the tip of the brush will dip into those green areas, and I don't want that to happen. And see, we're already getting like a little bit of a metallic look to it. Going up another step, and we just go inside that previous layer. And then I might want to pull an edge on this side. There we go. So we got like edge highlight that comes down. Not like it is a edge highlight that goes down. And then we go to our pure yellow, just like before, on the buckles. Pull that edge. Looking, I want to fade this edge highlight. Going for a little bit of that darker yellow. And then white to finish up. And I do need to hit the inside. I might pull some edges on some of these little objects in here. You don't have to do that. Again, that's a pretty convincing hit. This area here will need to be done with that, and we're just going to do the pendant the same way, and it'll just be flat Can see a little bit here, and since that's going to be catching light, I'll drop a highlight in there. Again, I want to drop it back a little bit, just do the pendant. Alright, we got our armor metal bits done, our little medallion here on the neck, and then decided to make these two little bangles hanging down. Nice high contrast with the kind of yellowy metal. Now we're going to look at the bone elements, so the two fangs that she has hanging off her neck and the skull. So we're going to base that in our black and brown and then build that up with khaki, and then probably go to white in a few areas. So I'm going to go ahead and get this base coated. Once that base coat is dry, time to start highlighting. Go for a rough volume on this with light source. So light source kind of still coming down the front. So the front of this forehead going to be pretty bright. So go ahead, knock this in here. We can take a little bit of wash and get that symbol back in there. Same for any sort of overages. Don't worry about overages too much. Just try and make sure that your shadows for that skull are maintained as much as possible. We're going to build this up to a khaki with a strong highlight on the forehead, and then leading into the features, the sharper areas of the skull, like under the eye. I'm going to hit those, and then it has a pretty good divot for the temple area as well, right above the eye, which would normally be like right behind the eye. These are pretty exaggerated shadows. Mixing in some more of that khaki. So this is the Reaper black and brown and the Vallejo game color khaki for this area. Lots of browns and earth tones in this model. So we're taking subtle mixes of each color just to make them a little bit different, so that each object kind of stands out, but at the same time they're tied together with that common shadow theme. Showing you guys some of my process with this stuff. I know the videos end up being pretty long because there's a lot of steps painting these higher level models. So you can see I'm just building up progressive values of this color, shifting more toward the khaki each time. Getting more developed shapes each time, more defined shapes. It's another model with 3 faces. So you got a wolf head, her face, and then a skull. Alright, we just have a few details to go. I went ahead and painted the little caps on the back of her spears with that same bronzish, brass-ish, non-metallic metal. Cylindrical highlight for those. Same recipe throughout. We finished up the skull, so going almost up to white with just a few tiny little white dots kind of here, there, just picking out those details. I did not have to go back in with a wash on the symbol. Just highlighted around it, and the natural darkness from our second or third layer of paint just helped to solidify that as a symbol. It's very readable on the top. I guess she's a G. I'm trying to remember. Oh yeah, the teeth here, highlighted toward the top, left them dark toward the ends. That's kind of what we're going to mirror here. I want to paint the spears in a pseudo non-metallic. They are kind of like carved bone, with a reddish tint to them. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint them in the same way we did the skull, the same recipe, but we're going to go back and glaze in an orangey red over the mid-tone of it and leave the bone kind of toward the ends, and then we'll go a little bit brighter toward the tips, leaving this kind of, again, that non-metallic, so those black areas will have a strong edge highlight just to represent that sharpness. So in order to do that, again, black and brown going to be our first layer. I'm going to mark out where I want my highlights for these spears to be. And then I'll paint one up. Leaving a little bit of black, and then kind of the reverse on the bottom side. So leaving black toward the leading edge here. Using our bone, our khaki, to begin the highlight process. And reversing on the top side. I think a non-metallic bone would be pretty cool. It's just it's a highlighting pattern, so I'm gonna go ahead and edge highlight. Start the edge highlights. That's kind of what we're going with our pattern. I'm gonna go ahead and paint this one tip up and then show you guys. Alright, fairly quick. Not going all the way up to white, just to give it more of that bone look. Maybe add a little bit more on this little bottom spine thing that makes it really hard to pull the spear out of you once it hits you. Alright, now let's take a little bit of red. Got that cinnamon red. I smack everything. Rinsing out my brush. Cinnamon red. Take this and we'll make a little bit of a glaze out of it. So I'm going to add a bunch of water to my palette. Squish that hair out of the way. And then take my paper towel here and just go boop. Unload when the brush is right in the top of the paper towel. I know my glaze is ready. I'm going to glaze in this cinnamon right there. Yeah, make it look dangerous. Make it look like that bone has soaked up a lot of blood. Gonna put it in the mid-tones there. That way we got that nice sharp spear bone coming in. I don't know, I feel stupid about this. I feel like I'm acting stupid because I'm excited, but I really like the way that color turned out. So we're going to do the rest of the spearheads in that manner. Make sure you highlight in the same vein, don't switch up. So these, I'm going to go bright here on this edge that's kind of leading into the light. I'm just going to mirror on the back side what I did. Then we'll move on to the actual spear shafts. Alright, so we have our bone spear tips in place. Same process for the front of this one. The highlights reverse because light's coming in from the center of both of these. So we have a bright spear tip here and then the bright spear tips there. Using that black and brown up with khaki and then khaki up with white. So make sure you separate these colors, because if you put the black and brown mix in with the khaki and white, you're going to desaturate your white, your color a little bit, especially that kind of khaki tone that you want for the bone. And then on the back side here, again, just kind of a mirror of the, not kind of, a mirror of the way we highlighted on each side, keeping it dark on the front underside and back bottom side. Now we're going to move on. We're going to do a little bit of glaze. We're going to give her some Circle of Oberos Pride here. Give her a little bit of green eyeshadow with a glaze. Going back in a difficult face. making sure that our paint is really thin. Like 10 thin coats consistency. I want to see how it coats on my hands. Really, really light. That's what I want because I want control. And I'll go above her eye for the eyeshadow. We still haven't painted the teeth of the wolf helmet here, so it's okay to get them a little bit green. That way we're giving her a little bit of color on the eye. And we can go back in and do some more layers. I'm going to do the other side off camera because it's in that really hard to get to spot. And here, so she's got a little bit of eyeshadow, and then we're going to take some of this necrotite green, give it a shake, and then go toward the outside of the eye. So going for a darker green on the inside of the upper eye, and then a little bit of a brighter yellowy green on the outside. Make sure I don't have too much moisture in my brush. You don't want to, especially in an eye socket, something that's going to collect pigment, grab that pigment and just flush all down into her eye. Just a little bit brighter. Hard to see with the lighting and the shadow. I'm going to keep adding small little touches. Bring it up. There we go. I'll keep working on that and show you in a second. One thing I forgot to mention is finished out the claws. Same technique as the spears. So going up to the very light bone up here. We didn't do the non-metallic technique where we dropped shadow on the bottom side and then light in the bounce light area. Went for more of like a horn or a claw look with those. Same thing that we kind of did here where it's brighter up at the top of the tooth. And then just added a little bit of kind of battle damage dot highlights for the tips of the claw, make it look like she's been digging into people with them. I also glazed in a little bit of cheek color here, add a little bit of blush to the face, finished up the eye, actually messed up the eye here and had to repaint, trying to get in the green eyeshadow on that side, but went in and fixed that with a little bit of dark underlining for the eye, just to re-outline the eye on that side, so she doesn't look like she has just like a green dot on that side of her face. Last two things to do on the figure. We got to get the haft of the spear here, so we'll take a little bit of mahogany in our blackened brown. We're using the Reaper mahogany and the Reaper black and brown. We're getting a little bit of wood grain to these, so we're going to draw some lines on here. With that, let's shade them up just a bit first. My cord is right where I'm trying to mix paint, so I'm jiggling the camera at the same time. I need more of that black and brown. That mahogany still good from yesterday, because it's a new day for me. So I'll do a little bit of a volumetric highlight, add some of our khaki that we have here to our base color. And then just kind of highlight the top of the spear with that. Again, nothing crazy. We're not going for reflective or anything like that. We're going with the texture for these. I'm not even going to try that on camera. I'm going to wait. It'll be shadowed down in there, and then the tops of these spears here. And I'll mix up a little bit of color for that wood grain, come back and show you. Alright, so we're adding in some wood grain here. We just mixed in a little bit of khaki to our, let me adjust this just a little bit. There we go. A little bit of khaki into that base color, and then one step up from that for a couple highlights. You notice the lines are kind of a two-tier when it comes to that grain. So I'll go back in here to the little bit darker area in between those two colors. And then just a wavy line. Feel like you're like drawing a snake. And just pull it down toward you. And then when I add little knot holes, it's just kind of draw an oval right here. You can follow along the grain. You can kind of start with it. They can join up too, so you can have them kind of come in together. Don't overthink wood grain too much. The spacing is, you know, here and there. And then we just highlight it up a little bit. Make sure my brush has got a point on it. Make sure the camera's on the right spot. Sometimes giving a little bit of a brush lick helps. And highlight the lines like that. You just repeat, and then you get a little bit of a wood grain on your spear shafts. Alright, got wood grain in on all of our spears. Time to get this little leather shoulder strap, you can see down in there, painted. So this area right here. But before we start working on that, let's go ahead and get the base rolling. I already have some earth on my palette. So we're going to lay down a heavy coat of it, avoiding all of our hard work. And then after that dries, we will put earth shade wash on. See how I'm delicately avoiding the toes and feet, because we gave her a nice manicure and we don't want to mess that up. So just a base coat of this color, and then we'll move on to the strap. I've been thinking about this strap. Got my base coat in. We're going to do it in the same leather that we did here. So the working up with the contrasts at the end with the wash, the Reichland Flesh Shade. Where'd it go? There it is, Reichland Flesh Shade. After you do a black and brown and khaki kind of work up to give you that nice oiled leather look. And then I'll get back with you on the base. Alright, adding earth shade to our base. So I'll sop it on there. I want some nice deep shadows. I'm taking very heavy brush loads with my liner. I'm just pushing around on the base and then wait a very long time for it to dry, or hit it with a hairdryer. I used a hairdryer because I'm not paid by the hour. I'll take a little bit of our earth and we're going to do a dry brush. Remember not to wet your brushes before you do dry brush. I know some manufacturers or companies might disagree, but I feel like it makes it streaky, and I want that powdery look for a base because it's dirt. I'm just dry brushing up toward the front, like crescent moon around the model, giving it that highlight that draws interest to the front. Shadows getting away from that interest. I'm going to take a little bit of our khaki. Go pretty heavy when you're switching colors. That way you can get kind of a dominant color in there without mixing your colors when you dry brush. Again, doing that kind of crescent. Everybody's trying to be quiet. Oops. There's such important information going on with the dry brush. People watching dry brush. Like, ooh. Alright, I'm going to add a little bit of white to the brush and a touch of yellow. Bring that out. And see over here on the paper towel, it kind of naturalized it because it already had that khaki on there. Super secret tips. Again, going toward the front. And just hitting the very tops of the parts in the back, but keeping that. I'm going to go under the foot. Yeah. Try not to hit the foot. There we go. There you go, one step brighter. Add a little bit more white. blend it out there. See how it's brighter? Just right there. Trying to think of like the angle that it's going to be. Oop, don't touch that. It's going to be photographed from. Awesome. Now we got to go find a tuft. Alright, found a tuft. Don't know what brand it is because I took them all out of the packaging and threw them in one box. Gonna trim this one down. It kind of has that crescent shape that can wrap around on the back side of the model. I don't want it to be like too interfering, so while it's on here I'm just gonna take my scissors and shape it up and be a little bit shorter. I'm not gonna do that on screen because I'll get it all over my palette. It fell off as paper, but I got it trimmed up. You can still see like a few little long hairs sticking up. So once you have it trimmed up like this, you know, coming in from the side of the brush, take the tip of your brush and kind of go in there and change angles and nip it around. I like with the, you know, I almost said butcher, barber, goes in and, you know, makes your hair look a little more natural instead of just having a straight line. I like to super glue my tufts on. One way to test if your super glue is stomped up, I was kind of thinking about that, is just like hold your hand out, squeeze it. Well, it's not like with the glue coming out, but up, and you can feel the air, so you'll know if you get glue or not. Instead of like getting ready to glue something and go, oh, this glue's not coming out. Super glue. Put enough to where it'll squish out. I'm kind of holding it at the wrong angle with these tweezers for where I was thinking about putting it. Squish it around. Yeah. Ill prepared. There we go. I just put it right back on top of all that glue. I'm going to hit this with a varnish, so I'm not worried about shiny spots, really. And then push down. Use the tweezers to kind of push into place. And you see like how it's all at different heights again? That's because we went in with the scissors instead of it looking like a piece of grass that's been like buzz cut. Just making sure we're getting a good connection. I'm going to let that dry for a little bit, and then we're going to add some paint to it. Alright, now that that's dried for a little bit, I want to blend it in with the base, so I'm going to take some of my earth shade here and just kind of dab into where the grass would be a little more shadowed. Paint your tufts. It's part of the model. Don't do this while your super glue is wet, because you will destroy whatever brush you're using. You eventually get it on the tip of the brush. So see how that kind of drops the shadow around it, makes it look like it's poking dirt out a little bit. And then we're going to dry brush the top with our khaki just to show that the tips are a little bit dead. You know how grass like kind of browns at the top? Taking an older brush, and then we're just kind of rake it over the top. See how it naturalizes it with the base? Makes it more cohesive. And last thing to do is to black the ring of the base. I have some black here, but I'm not sure where it's from or how old it is, so I'm going to take some of my Chimera black. Coats really well. And as you guys know, this is the end of the show, unless I missed anything. If you follow along, this is my final step, where I say my four wells. Hope you enjoyed watching. I want to make sure that you guys are getting the best lessons out of the content. I know my stuff isn't like entertaining. There's no flashing lights or fireworks. It's just straight lessons. This is painting in its natural habitat without cuts, big pictures flashing up on the screen. Probably feel like you're sitting at school. but that's okay. Well, as always, if there are questions, feel free to let me know in the comments. And as always, happy painting.